5 minutes. So, I know you're raring. Matthew is the complete expert on all this. So he's got lots and lots of really, really fantastic expert advice around sponsorships and eVisas to share with you. So if this sounds like something that you want to pass on to your teams, or if you just want to kind of get up to speed now, this is the right place to be. So I hope you've got some cup of tea, you've got something to eat if you want, and you're ready to kind of have a Friday lunchtime with a bit of a difference. So without further ado, I'm going to properly kick us off. Welcome everyone who has joined us to this Borderless / Birdie webinar. It's largely borderless, I'm going to say at this time. The only sort of key Birdie element here is myself. Just a quick note on the sort of moderation of this. So if you would like to ask a question at any point, please do so using the chat. So you should have access to everyone. Right. So I've just turned on the chat so it's available for everyone. If you have a question at any point throughout the webinar, pop it in the chat, and there will be a Q&A session at the end where I'll be making sure that your questions can get answered, if possible, by Matthew. So yeah, if you have any questions, we won't be doing questions throughout. We'll be saving it to the end, but do use the chat to put them in throughout. There will be a poll at the beginning as well, so get stuck into that into that poll. This is just to help Matthew sort of understand the level of experience people have with sponsorships at the moment. And I think that is all of our kind of housekeeping. Please do kind of use the chat. If you have any kind of issues there, you should find it at the bottom of your screen. Should be a couple of little speech bubbles that say chat. That's the place to type in and say hello. So I'm going to kick off now, and I'm going to hand over to the fantastic Matthew from Borderless to talk us through all things sponsorship and eVisas. Matthew, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Lucy. Really great to be here. Really excited about the partnership with Birdie and Flock. And thank you everyone for attending, especially on Valentine's Day. Echo what Lucy says. Love to keep these super interactive. So please pepper us with questions as we go. Anything and everything that relates to sponsorship. Before we get started, we'd love to understand who we have here in the room today. How much sponsorship experience do you have? So I think either a poll is going out or right in the chat, Lucy, one of those two things. Yep, poll's gone out. Fantastic. So let us know if you have any zero experience with sponsorship and you're here just to learn more about sponsorship, what it means, what Home Office compliance means. If you've sponsored a few people, we haven't done that recently. That was a few quarters, years ago. Let us know if you're in that category. Or if you're actively sponsoring and recruiting people, let us know if that's you. This is really helpful for us to calibrate the conversation today, and so hopefully we'll get the poll results. Will we get the poll results in a little bit, Lucy, or is that coming a little bit later in the discussion?
We can get them as soon as you want, Matthew. The poll's still
Awesome.
open, but we can end it and get those results whenever.
Okay, if it's going to expire in a second, that's fine, or whenever's good. I'll move on in the meantime, and as soon as that poll results come in, we'll pick that up. So in terms of what we're going to be talking about here today, we're going to be introducing sponsorship for those who are less experienced with sponsorship. We wanted to talk through some of the benefits of sponsorship, what we're seeing, some of the changing landscape, and how that's actually affecting the considerations for care providers, and also some of the challenges. Now, the challenges are not static. They change, they evolve as the government changes policy. And so we want to make sure we're covering off all of those topical considerations for you as care providers thinking about whether to engage with this, or if you're already engaging with this. We wanted to talk through compliance, Home Office compliance. Great, we've got the poll results. So 27% of the audience here today just learning, 55% of the audience is already actively sponsoring and recruiting, and then 20% sponsored a few people historically. Great, that's really good to know. So a real mix of people. We'll keep it super balanced today as we go through. So yeah, as I was mentioning, want to talk about home office compliance as well, because that's a key topic. We always get questions about that. And related to that, we can talk about some serious requests and what we're seeing from the front line here. Also wanted to cover off eVisas, what's changing, what's already underway for changing, and then finally where to get started with all of this sponsorship stuff, where to look for interesting resources. Got a ton of blog posts, content that we've produced at Borderless, and a bunch of calculators as well that make it really, really simple. And not the least for questions and answers as well. Everyone has lots of questions about this, so do please keep them coming in. Who am I? What's my name? So my name's Matt. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Borderless, and Borderless is essentially a technology platform and team of humans making sponsorship really, really fast, efficient, and ultimately effortless for you as care providers, but also for the individuals and candidates that you support through that sponsorship process. We're all about helping you solve those staffing challenges by simplifying anything and everything that relates to sponsorship. So if we're talking home office compliance, as that changes, how do you stay, how do you maintain as a business real-time home office compliance? How do you handle all the mechanics of sponsorship, the visa processing, the COS assignment? How do you get started with the process in terms of getting a sponsor license and maintaining your sponsor license? And finally, on the international recruitment topic too. So a really, really end-to-end system that makes it really simple to do every single part of this journey in a much more accessible way than either yourself doing it or relying on traditional solutions to that problem. Where are we working with? So we're working across the UK now. We have 350 providers on the Borderless platform. We've helped more than 2,500 people through their sponsorship journeys. Those are people who've come into the UK through Borderless, and many, many people who are within the UK who are switching sponsorships between organizations. And here's a smattering of the names that we're working with. We've made these particularly relevant for more domiciliary care. Obviously, there's a few care home groups in here as well. So really, really wide footprint. And I think the cool thing about what we're doing here is the fact that we support so many companies is we're constantly talking to the government, we're talking to the Home Office all the time, and so therefore we've got the latest insights on exactly what's happening on the front line of the boundary between businesses and the government. Now, as I'm sure many of you are aware, sponsorship has been a bit of a journey for the care sector over the last few years, and it really did change quite significantly in 2024. We had a record net migration number at the end of 2023, and that's led to a huge wake-up call for the government. So what used to be quite a simple process, a process where companies would get a sponsor license pretty easily, COS requests would fly through, that all changed in early mid-2024 on the back of that record net migration number. And what did we see? We saw huge increases in salary requirements outside the care sector. For the care sector, that was exempted. It just went up 10%, but it was obviously an increase in line with national minimum wage. Particularly for the care sector, though, the government singled out dependents of care workers and senior care workers, dependents no longer eligible to come in from abroad in the UK. If people were already in the UK, that was okay for those workers, but you essentially couldn't bring net new people into the country as a dependent. It's very mean, very unfair. We don't agree with that policy, but we haven't seen any change to that policy so far under Labour. The other thing we saw was a really, really big increase in obtaining additional certificates of sponsorship. And I'm sure many providers here on the call today face this pain on a daily basis, trying to secure additional undefined and defined COS. The government are not making it easy. They don't want to make this simple. And so it's really, really important to build a super strong case for your COS request to make sure that gets approved. The final thing we've seen is a huge increase in compliance and a large increase in home office audits. Something like 100 care providers have lost their sponsor license in the last 18 months. That's up from less than 10 in the period before that. And so just a huge amount of scrutiny and hiring of enforcement officers within the Home Office to make sure that companies are doing things correctly. And in all that chaos, we found a lot of genuine care providers were also caught up in that. So I'm sure as a business, you felt the additional burdens of compliance as the way the government have introduced that. Important to take a step back and reflect that sponsorship is really, really important to the care sector. It went from being in 2021 a very fringe activity. Not many companies had a sponsor license. There weren't that many migrant workers in the care sector workforce. Fast forward to 2024 and you've got something like 65% of all companies with a sponsor license and 16% of the workforce requiring a visa to work there. If you fast forward the numbers, then we think that the vast majority of companies are going to have a sponsor license because the number of migrant workers in the care workforce workforce is going to continue to float up. And obviously, this depends a lot on what kind of domestic engagement we get with the care sector, what Labour do around that. They've already said that they want to do some things. And so this is really going to depend. But we do see the future and a future of everyone's hiring strategy to be a mix of domestic recruitment of British workers, domestic recruitment of sponsored workers, and probably some overseas recruitment as well. So really, really important to make sure that you have access to that talent pool. Otherwise, you are making it harder, a lot harder for yourself from a hiring perspective. Why get involved in the sponsorship? What are the benefits to individuals and to organizations? Well, first and foremost, for businesses, it's actually helping you to fill that labor shortage. How do you actually reduce the shortages with a really much more stable solution? And so sponsored worker retention is anywhere, to be honest, anywhere from 3 to 7% sponsored worker retention. And compare that to an industry average of something like 30%. You can quickly see that people are sticking around, which gives you a lot of workforce continuity and stability. We hear tons of stories about the quality of sponsored workers, how hardworking and consistent they are, and how they help you improve quality of care delivery across your business, which is really, really important for your end service users. Lots of diversity benefits too in terms of cultural, specialized skills and knowledge transfer as people exchange ways of working. And then finally, and not to be sniffed at, are some significant financial benefits as well. So if there is any agency use across the business, that can be almost eliminated by getting involved in sponsorship. And when you compare the numbers, the additional roughly 20p an hour for sponsorship, the government fee that you have to pay, that is fractions of a penny compared to any kind of agency spend. So if you are using agency, for any significant permanent workforce shortage, you can massively reduce that cost. 2023, 24, and 24, 25, we saw lots and lots of government funding made available to care businesses, to organizations to support sponsored workers. And now, obviously, we've seen an increase in the number of, because of all the sponsor license revocations, an increase in the number of displaced workers. And the focus for this year's fund is to support those displaced workers. And we support many displaced workers through Borderless when they're switching employers as well. For the individuals, it represents stable jobs, career progression, skills progression. And if you compare the salary differential between working in the UK versus working overseas, in some cases it's 10 times the salary you earn in the UK versus overseas. And so you can actually send a large chunk of that back as well. For many people who've come in as well, especially before the dependent ban, they were bringing their entire families in, and that's led to a position most of the sponsored workers I speak to are planning to stay in the UK. They're planning to obtain indefinite leave to remain and ultimately citizenship as well. So it is that pathway, it is that whole life experience that people are doing and bringing in. So wanted to dispel a couple of common myths about sponsorship because we hear these all the time. So firstly, around the costs of this, there are lots of different fees involved here, but it's generally actually for an employer, there are only two mandatory government fees that you need to pay. So one is the COS assignment fee, which is currently £239. That is rising to £525 in about April, once it gets passes through Parliament. But the other the other main cost here, and in fact what drives the cost, is the immigration skills charge. And so that's a fee you pay to the government every year for the length of time you sponsor a worker for. It is, however, pro rata refundable. And so the best way to think about this is actually as as a monthly or even hourly rate. And it works out to, when you do the numbers, about 23p an hour on the hourly rate. This is for most care businesses that are small sponsors. If you're a large sponsor, it's a little bit more than that. But we find that 95% of all care companies are small sponsors because the asset and turnover level thresholds are quite high. So it's only the really, really big businesses that tend to be affected by that. And of course, you need to think about that in the context of retention of your sponsored workers. If you are training, if you are hiring domestic workers who are not staying in your business, there's that constant hiring, onboarding cost, and loss of skill associated with that turnover. So if you can retain people in your business, paying a small premium to the government for that seems like a very sensible thing to do. And that's why many care providers do that. The second thing is around complications. So it is a process that needs to be thought through. It is a multi-step process, and so it's important to have the right support in place. But many employers do obviously navigate things successfully. We've heard people on the call today who are doing it successfly. So the main thing to do here is stay compliant with read upon the processes, stay up to date via webinars like this. And make sure that you're following the rules from a compliance perspective. And we'll cover off what that means in a little bit. The final thing we talk about a lot, and we hear a lot, is this sort of perception of anti-sponsorship, anti-immigration from the UK government. And I think that is, in some ways, a fair criticism. The government obviously has moved more right, with Conservative introducing these policies, Labour actually continuing on some of these policies. I think the focus, though, is much more about compliance and enforcement against the worst offenders. It's not that the government's particularly focused on cutting down sponsorship. It just wants to ensure a balance in the workforce, making sure that domestic workers are partaking. And because of the lack of oversight, the lack of regulation prior to some changes we saw last year, a lot of the focus has tended to focus on the worst offenders. And so I always like to think about compliance as a bit of a spectrum, and therefore you want to be in the top 5-10% of companies from a compliance perspective, to stay very, very far away from any kind of Home Office audit or inspection. So what's happening with sponsorship in 2025? Already lots of changes. I mean, things change every week when it comes to the Home Office and how they respond to sponsor licenses, eVisas, and COS requests. But a couple of the key points that that I'd like to note here. The first one is around this has always been illegal. You weren't allowed to charge the COS fee, the sponsor license cost and immigration skills charge to candidates, but it's become extremely explicit now. If you do this, you will be banned from sponsoring. These are government-only fees. You must pay those government fees. Remember, the sponsor license cost is a one-off cost for your business. You don't pay that fee every time, and your license is now valid indefinitely, and you can sponsor as many people with that. It's only the COS fee you pay one time when you assign a COS, and the immigration skills charge that you pay for the number of years that you're sponsoring someone, which is that roughly 20p an hour number. Obviously, the COS fee is increasing, and that has an effect of raising sponsorship rates from 20 to 23p over a 5-year sponsorship. So a marginal increase when you split that COS fee across the length of sponsorship. Much more focus on right to work checks, some of the most common reasons that employers come to us when sponsor licenses have been rejected. And so as things move more digital, and we'll talk about eVisas in a second, really important to make sure right to work checking processes are in place. This is one of the most common areas of fines for the government when they are fining businesses for this. And obviously a continued ongoing focus on compliance and enforcement. So if we're talking actually sponsor license duties and compliance, you have some really, really critical duties as a business. And this is really to make sure that you are, as a business, accountable for the sponsored workers that you employ. And so what are your duties? You actually need to make sure that you are following all these obligations. So you retain the ability to sponsor workers. If you don't follow the rules, you could potentially lose your sponsor license. We'll come into the duties in a second, but essentially, if you don't follow the duties, then you're going to be at risk of having a license downgraded, suspended, and ultimately revoked. Essentially, from a duties perspective, you have two main duties. One is to continue to report on the business itself, the individuals in your business who manage sponsorship, and secondly, to report back on every single employee in the business, subject to lots of different changing circumstances. I think we have a slide on that later on too. Also wanted to call out that sponsor license duties begin immediately. As soon as you get your sponsor license, it doesn't start when you employ your first worker. So you need to make sure that you are keeping up with all these record keeping practices and reporting everything and anything and everything back to the Home Office as well. And so here are some of the reporting duties for employees. The first one is about employment status changes. So if your employee has left their job, if the sponsorship has ended earlier than expected, that needs to be reported within 10 working days. Really importantly as well, role is a really common stumbling block that we see. It's important the title and the duties reflect exactly the work someone's doing. You're not allowed to perform work outside that duty and at that title. And obviously the salary must be compatible with the minimum salaries and earnings. And there's quite a few different rules around what those minimums are. I'll share a link afterwards, which is a link to the calculators we've got on Borderless, because it makes it really easy to actually calculate all these numbers. And really importantly, if someone's changing roles, they may need a new COS and a new visa. This is often the case, more often than you think. So really, really encourage you to think about anyone in the business you've previously sponsored. Have they changed role in any way? Worth checking if they need a new occupational code. And thus new sponsorship. If their work has changed location, if they've gone from one site to another, that also needs to be reported back in the sponsor management system. Commonly, we see that sponsor license sites and work locations are not reported correctly, which isn't compliant. So really important to make sure that you have all those work locations in the sponsor management system. If someone is changing their immigration status, changing onto a different visa, or not renewing a visa, or if they're involved in some kind of criminal offence which could affect their right to be in the UK, that's really important that you report that back. And then in terms of work and personal circumstances, any change to contact details or work location need to get back in. The final thing is around absences and start dates. If people are absent for more than 10 days, if they're taking more than 4 weeks of unpaid leave, and if they started later than the date on the certificate of sponsorship, these are some common reasons that you must also report that back to the government as well. So there's lots and lots of, these are some high level things, lots and lots of detail within here. I'm sure there's probably plenty of questions on these topics as well. In terms of the reporting duties and changes to businesses, these are some of the things that you need to let the government know about. So reporting back changes to your authorizing officer, the person with overall responsibility for sponsorship in your business, and a key contact, who is the person who interfaces with your business and the government. When you join Borderless, we become the key contact, so we handle all of that communication for you. If you're adding or removing a branch or site, that needs to go in, as we talked about. If the business is changing details, address, if it's changing its accreditation or as well. And certainly things like mergers, acquisitions, takeovers, sales, anything and everything which can affect the corporate structure of the business needs to go back to the Home Office. Changes in sponsor size, so if you do exceed the asset and turnover threshold numbers, you have to report that back to the government. And if you are changing in any way the validity of your license, or if you're giving it back to the government, that also needs to be rendered dormant as well. So I wanted to cover off Home Office audits because we get lots of questions about this, and people on the call here today may have been subject to a Home Office audit already. What are these audits? Essentially, they're happening, it can happen in two ways. One is before you get a sponsor license, and this is a check from the government to make sure that you can fulfill your immigration requirements. The other is post-license, if the government wants to come and investigate to check that you are fulfilling your sponsorship duties. These are not always, they often result in a clean bill of health. So don't get too worried, but we do recommend that you go and speak to an expert who can help you with Home Office audits. This is a service we also offer if this is something you have been subject to, or if you have something coming up. What actually happens on the day, generally speaking, it's a half to full day event. Bags of fun. The Home Office come along, normally two people. They will interview you as the authorizing officer, and they'll also interview a number of sponsored workers that they've asked to speak to. And they'll be checking that your version of the events, there's no coercion there. They've had some really, really horrible stuff happening in the past around coercion and modern slavery, and so they want to make sure that everyone is freely employed as a sponsored worker. They'll also be doing tons and tons of checks on your business, both from their back end, the sponsor management system and other government systems, but also when they're with you on site, they'll be looking through all of the genuineness of your vacancy. You have all of these key documents, and I've listed a smattering of them here: ID check, right to work checks, employment contracts, absences, address history, pay slips, bank statements, policy checks, rotas, and many more documents beside that. So you want to make sure that all of these documents are available to hand, or better yet, stored in some sort of digital system to manage this. If you have a new license inspection, then essentially the decision will be to approve or deny that sponsor license. If it's denied, it can come with or without a cooling off period, which can be anywhere from a small number of months, generally speaking 3 to 6 months, depending on exactly what the reason for rejection was. If you have an existing license, then you can get a clean bill of health. You can have your license suspended and put in some remedial phase, or the license could be taken away entirely. How to best prepare for these things? Firstly, get some support. Secondly, audit your sponsor management system. Make sure that is all up to date. Finally, look through all of the reporting, gather all the documents, basically get fully prepared for what the Home Office is going to do when they come on site with you. This is we've already covered off a lot of this, so I won't go through this all in too much detail, but essentially pre-audit, you get the document request, and then the audit, we've already covered off as well. We've also covered off this one as well. So the consequence if you get it wrong, it's really, really important to make sure that you are staying compliant with the government, because as you can see from many of these stories, these news articles, and you've probably heard about many of these yourself, the penalties for non-compliance are super serious. You can get fined in the first case up to £45,000, and then for every single infraction, £60,000, and even worse, the sponsor license can actually be fully revoked, and you can be banned from sponsoring workers entirely, which may, depending on how many sponsored workers in your business or how reliant you are on that, be an existential risk for your business, and you may not be able to continue to operate and serve your service users. So I wanted to turn to eVisas now. Just a reminder, if you do have questions, it looks like there's quite a few bits in there. We'll pick those up towards the end. The UK system is becoming a lot more digital, and so one of the ways it's doing that is with eVisas. This is obviously for UK migrants and new visa applicants only. This is not a new visa. This is a digital record of your current immigration status. It's just moving digital, and it eliminates the need to have things like biometric residency permits, vignettes in the passport, and lots of ink stamps, so all that physical stuff that we've been historically used to. People are already receiving their eVisas. The rollout started more formally in autumn last year. It's still going on. I think we have a timeline on the next slide. No cost here. It's free for everyone with a current visa. And you're encouraged to move all of those legacy documents across to your UK VI account. Really importantly, this is not changing anyone's immigration status. This is just a translation from physical to digital. Why are they doing this? Many reasons for it. Obviously, the benefits of technology to make things digital, to make things secure, make things faster, means that you can't lose or damage these things. You can securely prove your right to immigration status when you with other parties within the UK, and it's supposed to make things faster at the border as well when you go through customs. In terms of the transition, what's happening? So they've extended there's been a bit of a delay with the rollout, and so that is now valid until 31st of March this year. That's out extended from the end of last year. So you've got another 6 weeks to do that. You must actually obviously hold valid immigration status. And they want everyone to transition to these things as soon as possible. So they will be invalidating these things after that date. But they are, for now, still usable. Wanted to cover off right to work checks and eVisas and how this process works. We've actually built a really handy checklist for how to do right to work checks. But I will cover off here, firstly, how to get your eVisa. So if you have a new employee, they should go and create their UK VI account. Once they have that UK VI account, they can actually generate a share code to prove their right to work. And when you have that share code, use the right to work checking status, which we've linked to the bottom here, to actually verify the individual's rights and the expiry of their leave to remain. And you're not supposed to be using these physical BRP cards anymore for right to work checks. You should be using the two links we've posted at the bottom here. So it should be a straightforward process. There are some very helpful videos the governments have produced to help employees through that. So make sure that you are, they have, your employees, your sponsored workers have their eVisas, and you're doing your right to work checks in a digital way. So what happens if you fail a right to work check? There's lots and lots of things and common failure patterns that we start to see. So the first one is around accepting expired documents. So double check those expiry dates when you're doing that. You need to also conduct right to work checks repeatedly for people who have limited right to work. So as that leave is starting to expire, you'll need to reconfirm that each time the person extends or changes that leave. And a lot of the failures actually are the inability to prove that you did the correct right to work check. So using the digital way, it's actually very straightforward. You can print that off as the record for the fact you've done the check. This is where the Home Office are super hot on revoking sponsor licenses, fining quite significant amounts of money if you are not doing right to work checks correctly. And if you have historically not done right to work check correctly, it's really important that when you apply for your sponsor license, you build that into your case. So if you've done that, come talk to us, and we'll make sure that that sponsor license gets approved for you. If you've already completed the check, but the eligibility changes, you need to change the employment status as well, and potentially do a new right to work check. And so this is really mission critical that you do appropriate right to work checks as well. In terms of eVisas, what do you need to do for what do you need to encourage your employees to do or tell your employees to do? They need to go over to gov.uk/eVisa to create their UK VI account. They will then confirm their identity with the passport, and that actually links that account to their eVisa. And then the main thing you need to do is just make sure your passport, the passport number in the UKVI account is the correct, on the eVisa, sorry, is the correct passport. So there's no delay when you're going through the border. I want to briefly touch on what Borderless is and what we've done. I said at the top of the conversations, but essentially we see ourselves as helping across the entire spectrum of sponsorship. So if you're new to sponsorship, if you're that 30% of attendees here today who are looking and learning more about sponsorship, we would help you initially by getting a sponsor license and getting set up with immigration and hiring processes for your business. As you grow into sponsorship, you might need to request additional certificates of sponsorship if you've sponsored more than the number of people you originally obtained in your sponsor license application. And if you're hiring from overseas, you will need to request a certificate, a defined certificate of sponsorship for every single additional overseas hire. And we also support many, many large employers too. So how do they manage sponsorship and scale when you have 50, 100, 200, 1,000 sponsored workers in your business? That's a really, as you can imagine, a bit of a compliance headache. So really important that you are doing things correctly at that scale too. And you need to do that while you're maintaining home office compliance. Really cool to see that we've built a Birdless, a Birdie, that's a cool word. Let's try that. A Birdie Borderless branded compliant right to work checking process. So you can actually link it. We'll link it in the after notes. And this is a really handy, informative, and accessible guide to how to do a right to work check step by step. You can print that off, tick it off every time you do it. And so you can download that just by following that link. I've been speaking for way too long, so I'm going to hand over for questions. Just a reminder of what Borderless is and does. Essentially, we are technology with the best of human and technology for everything to do with sponsorship. So sponsor licenses, home office compliance, immigration processing, recruitment, all combined with lots and lots of expert support and advice. We're leveraging the benefits of technology to make this process super transparent, super efficient, and the difference between doing it yourself, using a traditional solution, using Borderless is pretty stark. So we'd encourage everyone to scan the QR code, grab some time with our team, and join the platform. Great. Shall I
Perfect.
pick the questions up?
Yeah,
Lucy? Yeah.
absolutely. I can either so we've had a few coming in as you've been speaking, and yes, if there's any questions that you have for Matthew that you'd love to get answered while we're still here on the session, please put them in the chat box. And yeah, we'll do our best. One of the questions that came in before was, what is the process for checking right to work? Is it still share code from Hamza?
Yeah, so you go on that link and you'll be able to essentially use if they have the UKVI code, if everyone's set up on their UKVI account, you can actually share that share code with the employers. So if you follow that link, then you'll be able to do that.
Fantastic. And then we had a question from Wendy. What do you do if you've missed reporting a change within a 10-day period?
Yep. So the best thing to do there, Wendy, is to come clean to the government and basically report that you're reporting it late. Generally speaking, unless you're doing this sort of systematically across the business, if this is the first time you're doing this and you're open and honest about it, they're not going to penalise you. But they will want to see if this is a repeat pattern of behaviour, you're always reporting late, or if there's sort of a systematic issue across the business that you've historically reported everything late. Probably good to take some advice on that topic because you don't want to flag too much that you are reporting late, and the Home Office is ultimately going to conclude that maybe the right sponsorship process are not in place in the business in order to maintain sponsorship. So my advice, if this is a one-off, is to report it as soon as possible because you don't want the government to find out about it later, and you should be okay in that case.
Okay, no, great. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's always better to be proactive
Yeah,
in
exactly.
reporting
Yeah.
things. And obviously in social care, as we all know, evidence is everything. So make sure that you're proactive in reporting that and you keep that log of those communications. Another question from Hamza: will Borderless carry out right to work checks, compliance, etc. for clients?
Yep. So, great question, Hamza. We don't do this currently, but it is coming. So, watch this space. At the moment, there are just various links in the platform to how to do the right to work check and actually upload it to Borderless. We can store that information for you. But in the future, we will actually be able to perform the right to work check all automatically through the platform. So, if you want to learn more about how that all works, just scan the QR code, and we'll be able to take you through and show you where that's going to fit in.
Fantastic. And I think we did have a question around sort of getting all the links and things. I believe we will be sending a sort of follow-up email to this with, recordings of the webinar, so you can share this with anyone in your team as well who either has questions around the kind of sponsorship piece or right to work piece, or you can rewatch it yourself if you if you really if you just can't get enough of the wonderful Matthew. Um, so yes, we will be following up with that, and then sort of ongoing. I mean, it's quite easy to get in touch with the Borderless team. So if you do have any further concerns around sponsorship or things, then either get in touch or just keep an eye on what they're doing. This is a huge this is of huge importance to social care, the ability to sort of care for and properly support sponsored workers. So it's always really, really good to consider it as an avenue for your business if you haven't yet already. But also, yeah, speak to people like Borderless who are here to help, I think, in many ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of got through so much good stuff so quickly. Oh, we have had another question come in. What's the main benefit of the corporate approach between Birdie and Borderless? We currently use Birdie. So I'll take this one for now. So we are simply just at the moment, this is the very start of kind of us sharing some kind of resources and working together and seeing how potentially Borderless can help people who, are Birdie partners or even not Birdie partners. And it really is just a case of bringing the best people in the industry on this particular issue to you. So at the moment it is merely just a kind of introductory, hey, if you need help with this, these are the guys to go to. Further down the line, I'm sure we've got many exciting things that we can plan and work on together. I hope I hope you feel the same, Matthew.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, to echo that as well, I think there's what I've discussed with other members of the Birdie team is over time, various different integrations, but that's all for the future. And so now, exactly as Lucy says, it's about making sure that you're supported from all the different needs of the business, and you've got access to the best solutions.
Absolutely. So this is very much a borderless showcase, I suppose, in some ways today to kind of just introduce people to some of the amazing things that they can help with. So apologies. I always hate to just cough loudly down the microphone. I think unless there are any more questions from anyone in the audience at all, then and if you didn't get a chance to type or if you prefer to ask Borderless direct, do scan the QR code and go straight to these guys. Otherwise, I think we may be able to be in a position to give
Get a little bit
people
of time back. There
time
we go.
back, yeah, on
Let's
their day,
head off to
which
Valentine's
is
Day.
fantastic. Yeah, which is that's our Valentine's Day gift to you. It's
Good.
time, the concept of time.
Can't get
So exactly. So thank you so much to everyone who attended. Obviously, it is not easy in this industry to take time away to focus on anything other than the delivery of care and running of businesses. So we're all really, really appreciative of you being here. We will send a follow-up email to everyone who attended, everyone who signed up for this webinar. So if you want to pass this on to anyone, if you feel it would be of interest to them, we're going to make it really easy to do. And thank you so much to Matthew as well for joining
Thank
us
you for
and
having us.
spending your time. No problem.
IB, we're not a recruitment agency. I just saw that question come in. We're much more, yeah, we don't operate like a recruitment agency. We don't We connect you with individuals who have applied to Borderless, and you can actually create direct links on Borderless for people directly applying to you. But that is, I haven't really talked about that here at all today because that's not really the focus. The focus is all about streamlining sponsorship compliance through the tech solution. So thinking about us as a recruitment agency is not the right for me.
Yes, I think if you have any questions around sort of like what Borderless can support with, absolutely do get in touch and use that QR link or go to that URL
Yep.
underneath, because there's so many things all to do with that sponsorship piece and making
Yeah,
it
exactly.
easier on both sides for sponsored workers and employers. But yes, not a recruitment agency. So I think unless there are any more questions that are going to come through. Thank you to everyone who's asked something or commented in the chat. Really, really appreciate your engagement on this. And yeah, I think 15 minutes. Please go and have a well-deserved cup of tea or something with this bit of time. Thank you so much to everyone for joining. We'll be in touch soon, and I hope you enjoyed.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye.